Hi guys, welcome back to our podcast. Today we're going to be discussing fresh cuts from Drury Street, Dublin. Fresh Cuts has been sent a survey and given us back brilliant answers about their sustainable fashion, and we're going to just discuss the answers and see what that means for the fast fashion industry in Ireland.
We put several questions to Fresh Cuts about their business, but we started off by asking them a little bit about their target market. They told us that their main target market is anyone that is looking for a sustainable option in terms of casual clothes. We feel that this is important because there is not a lot of sustainable fashion companies in Ireland that offer clothes for a range of different people. I'd say just start off with the cost and then just talk about why it costs that.
Okay, so about materials and stuff, really.
Yeah, and just talk about how this 25-35 for a jumper and 60 to 80 for or for a t-shirt and 60 to 80 for a jumper, and just saying that how much it costs to make, shipping, design, and the thing about the VAT as well is kind of important.
And the fact that it's being ethically made, so the workers are getting a full wage, whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. So I just go from there?
Yeah.
Okay, what is the average price of any item of clothing you sell, such as a jumper, and how do you decide these prices? So we got the answer that a t-shirt would cost between €25 and 35, and a jumper would be 60 to 80. And the reason that they're this price, it's actually fairly cheap considering that it's sustainably made, because they have to take the cost of the workers into consideration as well as the materials to make sure that they're sustainable. So they also have VAT added to their t-shirts.
I think it's really important to notice that the government doesn't really support sustainable businesses in Ireland at this point, especially with the lockdown and the COVID-19 pandemic. We have to acknowledge that. But on a day-to-day basis, sustainable businesses in Ireland don't really get a lot of support from the government in terms of grants and funding. So I think that's an initiative we should really be bringing to the forefront of this argument, especially locally.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. And as well, because they were saying that, we might think someone's looking at sustainable businesses that, like €25 is actually quite expensive for a t-shirt. But by the time their VAT is 23% because of levies, so by the time that is took into consideration, they're really only getting €20 into their pocket. And that also takes the cost of having to ship sustainable goods from other countries. What we found really interesting was that when we completed a survey in our school, we found that a lot of both teachers and students felt that sustainable clothing was unaffordable. We put this opinion to Fresh Cuts to see what he thought. Ultimately, his main point of view was that this was more of a mindset than a fact, which we found was actually quite right, really. He talked about the throwaway culture we have, I suppose, especially here because of pennies, that we have. He was talking about the fact that we have a habit of maybe buying something in pennies every month for €15, but that it won't last, and that when we think about the cost of sustainable clothing, it's basically just the cost of production as well as the fact that it's being produced ethically. So we have to put into account the fact that workers are being paid properly, and also that any materials used are being sourced sustainably and grown without chemicals. So it obviously costs more to do all this, so it's obviously then going to cost more to sell it so that there is some profits. In the end of the day, it's a business. But we thought what he said was really important about the fact that companies are really only producing fast fashion because of the huge demand we have for it, so that in order for change to come around, consumers need to change their ways and be less disposable in their actions, so that companies will then see, okay, we need to change. Because at the end of the day, if we are saying, if we are buying from fast fashion companies, we are saying that it's okay to have underage labor, and he was saying that we are basically saying, oh yeah, it's okay to have a ridiculous amount of harmful chemicals. Unless we fight back, the only way to fight back is our actions.
And again, you could buy one sustainable sweatshirt for, let's say, about 60, but then throughout the year you might buy a few penny sweatshirts that would kind of wear and tear throughout the year. Like you may as well just buy the one sustainable one rather than buying about like, you know, 4 or 5 cheapy ones during the year that would end up tearing, really breaking the cycle really of fast fashion buying.
Absolutely, and especially because in our last video we kind of spoke briefly about false economy and what that means for the consumer, but that's one of the biggest aspects of fast fashion that really impacts all of us on a day-to-day basis. So what Fresh Cuts and other sustainable fashion businesses are doing to combat that is, although their products are more expensive, you only have to buy it once.
Yeah, they really try and put an emphasis on quality over quantity, and that really just proves the points that the owner of Fresh Cuts made, that it really is just down to the way we're thinking, that we're so used to getting everything so cheap but buying so often that we're just not taking into consideration that in the long run this is really a better way to spend my money, but it's also really the same amount of money when you add it up.
Yeah, and again, there is always a cheaper option for sustainable clothing. And again, that kind of comes back to the point from our last episode about secondhand and charity shops are still better than buying from pennies. So definitely keep considering that.
So the next question we had is, we asked Fresh Cuts what their opinion was on the best way to increase the amount of sustainable purchases in Ireland. And what Fresh Cuts basically came back to us with was that they should be happy to watch The True Cost on Netflix, which is a documentary on sustainable fashion, and see what they think about fashion brands. So really what they want to talk about here is education. And I think we, especially as a project group, think that education is key to ending fast fashion, because if you don't learn about the problems, you're clearly not going to care about wanting to solve them. But they're huge and they affect everyone, including you, but also other people on the planet, animals, the actual planet itself. And on a bigger scale, it affects countries. Fast fashion can either make or break a country's GDP and their income of a year.
And I do think it's important that that it's kind of young people as well that are kind of spreading the message, because at the end of the day, it will be young people that will grow up and make the change. So I think it's important that when you bring up the awareness, to bring it to your friends so they could kind of spread the word as well.
And I think as well that I can definitely speak from personal experience that before this project, I had often heard the phrase fast fashion, but I mightn't have fully understood its meaning, or I suppose I just heard it, but I didn't think that because we're in Ireland, I didn't actually think that it affected us in any way, and I didn't actually think of the long-term effects in other countries. And I found that for me, education has changed my total perspective, and reading articles and hearing more from Zoe or Marie, it's really changed my perspective on the way I will shop forever. And we know that it's unrealistic to get everyone to change their ways. It's like anything else, that won't work. But even if we can bring change to some small amount of people, anywhere is a start, and from that change can happen.
Absolutely. I think that's a really important point Saoirse just made. And especially that if you just consider every single one sustainable change you make has an effect on the fashion industry. It genuinely does. And it might not feel like it might not seem like it, considering the amount of consumers brands like Pennies have. But for every article of clothing you buy sustainably or secondhand, or don't buy it all, if you get it off someone or you try and make it yourself, those are the best ways to stop fast fashion from becoming an even bigger problem than it already is. Every time you choose sustainably, you help to decrease the demand for fast fashion.
Definitely, yeah. So our last question in our interview was, in the coming years, what are the hopes for your business and the sustainable clothing market in Ireland? And the main point they explained was that they hoped to create definitely more awareness around sustainability, and for people to really realize how much goes into one garment of clothing, and that close to 3,000 litres of water can be used to produce one t-shirt. So that's kind of, again, coming around to the environment and water wastage, especially. That one gets kind of overlooked a lot, how much water is used for one small t-shirt.
Yeah, I found it really interesting. I think it should be highlighted that to explain their point here, when we asked for their hopes for the future, they really use facts to get us to understand their point of view. Because as Mairead said about the t-shirts, and they were just explaining to us that, like, they were just explaining to us that, like, because I thought it was really important to highlight as well that they made a real use of statistics and kind of facts to show us their hopes for the future, and to give us a better understanding of their point of view as a company. As Mairead said about the water, and they just went on to say that, you know, after all though that use of resources that we ultimately can't get back, we're then buying that t-shirt for a tenner and we wear it once and we never even think about it again. He just Stephen from Fresh Cuts, he really just wanted to show us that it's even the things we don't think of are causing huge damage, and we don't even know, like, Stephen wanted to put forward the point that it's the little things that matter, and we might even realize that we're making an effect, but if we do one small thing, we can make a change for the better instead of the worse. And that's what he went on to tell us, that, you know, as Mairead said about the water wastage, then we go and we buy a t-shirt for a tenner and we wear it once and we never wear it again. And I just think it's so important to understand that like, we can't change big things, especially at our age, but we can, even if we feel we're making no difference, in the long term for our planet, we ultimately are.
Definitely. Yeah, I definitely agree that awareness really is the most we can do, really, as a kind of age group as a whole, until we can kind of grow up and be able to put that change into action, really, that idea.
But there are definite small actions that everyone can take, and these are things that can be fostered in the home. So if you think that your family will be open to learning about it, please don't stop and spread the information. It's really important that the more of this is out there, the better it is for the planet. And the more support that we show sustainable businesses like Fresh Cuts, a brilliant organisation in Dublin, the better it will be, because we'll have more of these sustainable business growing in Ireland, and it will be easier to combat fast fashion if there's more of an option.
Yeah, I agree, and I just think that we learned so much from talking to Fresh Cuts, because we're all very interested in environmental issues and kind of creating a better situation in terms of that, but we'd never really thought of anything from the point of view of a person who really does care about being ethical and being sustainable, but also it's their way of living and it's their way of creating an income. And we just found that the way they balance that was so interesting, and it just went to show that, like, we can all do something, and even when we think it's impossible, like, it ultimately isn't.
Yeah.
Okay guys, so we're going to leave it there for today. We hope that you really got a lot out of this episode, and we'd like to thank Stephen and Fresh Cuts for their immense help with this project. They answered the survey, their answers are brilliant, and we'd like to, if you want to see more of Fresh Cuts, please check out our Instagram. We have them tagged in our stories, they're in our highlights, and we've tagged them in posts as well. They're a brilliant company. They do a lot for our environment and they do a lot for the country, especially in this time. So also, if you haven't understood any of the terminology, will you just contact us and we can kind of clear all that up as well. We can give definitions, we can give more information, further reading, anything like that. We'd love to hear from you. We'd love to spread more education about this. Please don't hesitate to contact us.
Thanks for listening.
Stay tuned. Our next episode will be out on the 11th of February.
Bye for now.